Hey guys, so welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I'm going to be doing my monthly reading wrap up. In March I feel like my reading was a little bit all over the place. There were definitely some highs that will stick with me forever, and there were also some lows that made me struggle through a couple of books this month. And in the month of March my lowest rating was 3 stars, which is not too bad. It's kind of like middle of the road. And in total I read 6 books in March, with my genre breakdown being 1 non-fiction, 1 short story collection, 1 literary fiction, 1 sci-fi, and 2 classics. So I was like pretty well rounded this month. So let's get started with the first book that I read in March, and that was Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad. This is a short story collection, and it is set in Lagos, Nigeria, and we basically follow various stories of different women in Nigeria and their experiences dealing with men. And some stories, there's one story that's in the perspective of a man, so I feel like it's focused on the experiences of the women, but the main focus, I'd say, is the actions of men. And these stories are pretty horrific, kind of with like a slight comedic tone, but they're not good, happy stories. I mean, there are moments of like a savior type of trope where a character will be dealing with one bad man and then another one will come along and help them. And this book, honestly, it covers a wide range of dilemmas. Like, some that come to mind include a pastor's wife dealing with infidelity, a group of women that has husbands that are gay, and a woman who is catfishing on social media, like pretending to be a baddie whilst being a lot more reserved. So we definitely go through a lot of tragedy, but there is usually like a comedic undertone to the things that the characters suffer. The women in the stories, a lot of the time they are being taken for a ride, as in like being treated unfairly, treated poorly, but there are moments where the female protagonist characters are the ones that are maybe in the wrong, or like have chosen to accept the poor actions of their partners. There were actually a couple stories of that, like of the female characters living in denial, because it's just in their situations it would be easier to forgive and to forget. I felt like the writing was good. It was honestly very easy to read because she didn't overwrite the book, and it felt very well paced. Honestly, I didn't feel like I wanted more from any of the stories. I feel like they went as far as they needed to, and my overall feeling on the book is that I enjoyed it. I think that it was interesting, and it's always nice to read Nigerian literature. I think it has like a very distinctive quality in its writing, and this book definitely had that distinctly Nigerian quality, which made it extremely fun and enjoyable. The next book I read in March was The End of Lonliness by Benedict. This book actually came out 10 years ago in 2016, so it's not that new, but it's also not like a classic. It was originally written in German, translated by Charlotte Collins, and the publisher is Skipter. Never really heard of them, but I absolutely love the cover. It's really a nice cover. And for this book I gave it 4 stars, and the reason why I gave this book 4 stars is because it's a good book, but it's just kind of, I felt like the characters didn't feel real. Just for a bit of background on the novel, it is following 3 siblings that unfortunately lose their parents. That causes their family to split apart. They are physically in the same school, but they are like on their own in a sense, and we get to witness each of the siblings dealing with their grief and what comes of them. We follow this family from when they are young children up until their middle life, so we really do get a good look into the ways in which their circumstances shaped their lives as adults. In a sense, it was interesting, and I felt like one thing that the book did well was it had a lot of beautiful quotes. It had so many beautiful quotes and like reflections. I think that added a lot to the novel, but overall the characters, especially the female characters, I felt like they were very much not written in a way that feels respectful to women, and it felt like a lot of the female characters were reduced to tropes, and like they felt very two-dimensional, whether they were loud, grieving, or just objects of desire. I just felt like the women in this book were not treated with dignity and respect, and that really grated me, unfortunately. And I've seen a criticism of this book being that it felt like it was just like trying to be extremely sad for no reason. And I do feel like the last tragedy that happened to our main character, I won't say that it didn't come out of nowhere, but I didn't really mind it, honestly, because I guess I wasn't even that connected to the character, so the bad things happening didn't hit emotionally. Like this book, it was nice to read and there were some like good moments of reflection, but emotionally it didn't touch me as much as I wished it would, and as much as I know that the author was intending to. I think that there were definitely some moments where I connected to the novel, but the sibling relationship, like, that was kind of done very well, but the romance, for me, it didn't captivate me. Would I read more of Benedict Wells? I think I will, if he has other works, but I just hope that he treats women with more dignity and respect. The only way that I could explain how it felt was just kind of like very tropey and very much like Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and they were not treated as full human beings, in my opinion. But that didn't mean that I hated this book. I still enjoyed it. There were beautiful moments, but emotionally and in terms of the characters, just missed the mark, unfortunately. The next book that I read in March was The Glass Castle by Jeanette. This is her memoir that she wrote about her experiences growing up and how she escaped the toxic childhood that she had. And I gave this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. This is probably the first memoir that I've read that I've given a 5 stars. I'm usually not a huge memoir person, but this story was just amazing. So for a quick little synopsis of the novel, following Jeanette and her 3 other siblings, her older sister, her younger brother, and her younger sister. Jeanette's parents are quite an unconventional bunch, and they do not believe in the structure and care that normal families give to their children. They kind of have a very sink or swim mentality, and her father, Rex Walls, is a man who is larger than life in a sense, and he is also an alcoholic. And so we watch everyone in their family let these children down from their father through his alcoholism and his lack of responsibility, and their mother through her complacency and her inability to mother the children that she had. And we watch as her open-eyed awe of her father especially turns into something more sober as they witness their parents neglect them, and as they start to understand that they are being neglected. And we watch her drift away from her parents and from her position as her father's favorite daughter, and she finally finds a way out. And this is a tragic story, but it does not have a sad ending, not in the way that I thought that it would. It's almost a story of unbelievable resilience and unbelievable triumph. It's also a story about the cycles of abuse, because her father, Rex Walls, had gone through his own issues, and we get to witness that when they go back to the place where he lived out of desperation. Trigger warning for this book: there's a lot of abuse, alcoholism, neglect, and I believe since this book, Jeanette Walls has written other novels on her childhood and on her life, detailing more things, and I think I might pick up the other ones. One thing that I really loved about this novel was how she was able to portray the world around her depending on the age that she was. So when she was very young, a 4 or 5-year-old, she really captured that unfailing belief in her father, and she made you feel the love and the awe and the respect that she had for him. Like, everything that he did was amazing, and he could do no wrong, and you felt that way even as he was doing the most insane things. She still portrayed it to us through the eyes of her younger self, and I found that to be a really great choice in telling the story, because it made us understand her and her experiences and the way that she internalized them. Honestly, I feel like this book explores a lot of themes. It explores poverty. First of all, like, they have no money a lot of the time, and how they survive and what they survived on. Honestly, it's baffling. It explores belief, escapism, trauma, and it explores like the loss of innocence. That moment when you realize that the gods that you've held in your life are just mere mortals, and they're not going to do the things that they said, and they lie, and they will let you down, and they will put you in dangerous situations in order to get their fix in life, and they are not going to do anything to protect you. They'll do anything to get their fix. Honestly, if you've ever had a complicated relationship with a parent, I would recommend this. I think I didn't expect this book to be so insane. It just gets to a point where they're living in the most abject conditions, and their home is literally falling apart, and no one cares. And it's honestly devastating to read about the things that those children went through. Closer towards the end of the book, Jeanette brings up the question of homelessness, and whether that's something that people choose. But I honestly think that her parents didn't choose homelessness. I think that they were addicts, and if they had proper structures and systems and things that they could do, they wouldn't have been happy with just being on the streets. It was the addiction that kept them there, not necessarily that they wanted to live as vagrants for all of their time. And honestly, like, not just what the children went through, but the toxic nature of the relationship of the parents. Like, in some moments it was like the dad was adamant about being an alcoholic, but there were also other moments where the mom did not want her husband to be sober. That in itself was a very complicated dynamic, because it's almost like they had to drag each other down. They couldn't rise above it. They were, in a sense, bad for each other. It felt like a complete work, and I recommend it to anyone, just even on the basis of like understanding the level of suffering that people can endure in this world. The next book that I read in March was Annihilation by Jeff VanDerMeer, and this is my first book by Jeff VanDerMeer. I kind of liked this book. I was confused for a lot of the novel. I didn't know what the book would be like. I just knew that it was incredibly highly regarded by a lot of different people, so that's kind of what led me to decide to pick up this novel. And I think that this book might not be for everyone, and it may not be for me. Okay, for the synopsis of this novel, we're set in this sort of near future world where there is a demarcated zone which has been subject to an ecological event which has caused a sort of contamination to occur, and that contamination is just sort of like this extreme randomizing changes in the ecological landscape. So just mountains moving on to rivers, moving on to swamps, just a lot of randomizations in like the natural world. So we have a task force which has the directive of exploring this land and finding out what is happening there. The place that they need to explore is called Area X, and they are sent by the Southern Reach, which is like the government in this world. And this expedition is the 12th expedition, and it is comprised of a biologist, an anthropologist, a psychologist, and a surveyor. And in order to cross over into this mysterious zone, the explorers have to be put under some level of hypnosis, because it is damaging or difficult, or maybe just to keep more secrets about the area. There's a lot that we don't know, so it's almost a type of book where you can't really say anything for sure. The explorers are not supposed to speak about their personal lives, and they only refer to each other in terms of their professions. And it's almost like from the outset they are encouraged to be suspicious of each other, and there's like an air of hostility that exists. There is no camaraderie, and there's just a lot of tension. The psychologist is sort of put forth as the leader of the group. She's the one who knows these subjects and is able to use hypnotic phrases that will calm them or make them see certain things or like just shape their perception, get them to go to sleep. That's kind of her role within the group. And as the book goes on, we are led to question what these explorers have been put through. And we also are following the perspective of the biologist, and we get to understand her reasonings for even volunteering to be part of the expedition. And that is because her husband was part of a previous expedition and he returned to her sort of himself but not himself, and she kind of wants to understand what happened to him. So the structure of the novel is very much in our protagonist's head, and she sort of reveals things to us slowly, and she also goes through a sort of a change, and we kind of in a small way we can't trust her because she kind of speaks to us as if we're like witnessing the situation with her, and she hides things from us. In a sense, does add tension. Those are the moments where I really enjoyed. I also really enjoyed her backstory and her personality and her relationship with her husband and her insecurities in that relationship. I know, I'm like such a literary fiction girl. I'm reading sci-fi, and the best parts for me are the character-driven ones. But anyway, it feels like a fever dream. There's a lot of monsters, and I found it very difficult to imagine these creatures and imagine the sort of like the natural phenomenon that is unnatural, but like occurring in that space. I found the visualization a bit difficult. This is a series, so I might continue on with this series. I'm not 100% sure. I believe it has 3 more books. I mean, it was quite short to read, but I think if I do continue with it, it won't be like right away. I think I would recommend this to someone who enjoys sci-fi. The next book that I read in March was Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. I think this was my favorite book in March. So this novel, honestly, it is such a novel. It follows so many themes, but I'll try to condense it. We are following Milkman Dead, aka Macon Dead the Third, and he is a young black man who's growing up in Massachusetts in the north. We follow him as he tries to find his place in America and tries to find his meaning and tries to find himself, in a sense, and we get to see where that leads and how he is not just a product of himself, he's a product of the past, his family's history in the South, the history of slavery, the history that his direct ancestors have lived through. We witness him go from being a complacent young man who had his life sort of dictated to him. He never really had enough courage or even incentive or motivation to make his own decisions. It's almost like this radical responsibility that he needs to get to. It's such a good book. I'm not doing it justice. And there's just so many themes that we follow in this novel, especially with the African American context, the context of like names, and it's set in the like bootlegger era of America. So like prohibition is rife, alcohol is, illegal, and just the black experience. So covering things like colorism, like respectability politics, and just so many interesting and amazing things. I loved Toni Morrison's writing. I loved reading a unapologetically African American story. There were just so many comical moments, painful moments, yes, but comical moments, and just honestly painfully relatable moments. Even as a South African, there are certain things that I can relate to when it comes to the African American experience, and I mean the black experience alone, like the power of a name and the meaning of a name. And it's like the name itself, it honestly is, it's such a profound book. It's so meaningful and it's so beautiful. Like this book covers everything from love, from expectation to history, injustices. It's just honestly a perfect book, almost. There's really no way for me to adequately discuss this novel except for me to say that it is such a great and powerful novel, and it has changed my life. So definitely one of my favorites. The last book that I read in March was Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This novel is following Clarissa Dalloway on a day when she has decided to throw a very important party. Mrs. Dalloway likes to throw parties, and she is married to a conservative politician, Richard Dalloway, and we essentially follow her perspective of her history, how she became the woman that she is, and her ex-lover, Peter Walsh, her friend that she was in some ways in love with, which she has lost contact with, Sally, and also just exploring other themes of the war and PTSD and aging, British high society, culture, class, and also just like internal dialogues, internal issues. Yeah, I liked a few things about this book. I liked certain themes that we explored, as I mentioned, but I also liked reflections that were put in very beautiful ways. This book is very complicated, so I liked the interweaving of ideas. It kind of follows this like never-ending, almost like a single continuous shot, which kind of interleaves and interweaves perspectives between people in this very masterfully crafted way. A lot of motifs around time and flowers and trees and nature, and it kind of has this grandiose feeling of the significance of a life. I think that's kind of what impresses me the most about this book, is that there is a lot of context in this novel, and if you took the time to truly study it, there is a lot to be found in this novel. That's what really impresses me, is that it's a highly complex novel. And I think there's a lot of reflection in this novel, of reflection of the specific personalities of Clarissa. Clarissa is a woman who, instead of existing as sort of in authenticity, she kind of exists in extravagance, and she views herself and others view her as sort of like vapid, and she kind of tries to fight that allegation within herself, but she honestly can't, because she loves to throw parties, and her vapidness is not just in throwing parties, it's kind of like in this scathing classism that she has, even so far as to neglect or to fall out with her friend simply because she married someone below her. Kind of like how this classism is always like wrapped in this sweet little bow of, politeness. And then we have Peter Walsh, who is like, I feel like Virginia Woolf was trying to be explicitly misogynistic through his character, but even through his misogyny, he kind of is the one person who is able to view Clarissa through the clearest lens, in a sense, and she's aware of that, and there's sort of like this tension that exists between them. He still loves her, but he's also incredibly misogynistic and incredibly entitled, incredibly rude, and he believes so much of himself, but he, in a sense, in terms of like British society, in a way, he is a failure. The book was written in this very interesting, I want to say stream of consciousness, but I feel like it's beyond stream of consciousness. It's honestly like the craziest writing style that I've ever read in my life. It was almost a writing style that didn't work. I found it very difficult to keep up with it. It moved at a pace which was insanely quick, honestly. There were just so many moments where I could not keep up, and I felt myself, I was losing it. And I think that if I ever was to reread this book and study it, I would need to be incredibly concentrated. Only when I was like paying attention to each and every word and to each and everything and trying to like link that to what I've read previously, those were the only moments where I actually felt that I enjoyed the book. But even in moments where I was paying attention, there were still times where I just felt like the writing was not for me. And it got to a point where towards the end of the book, it felt very repetitive in terms of like being in someone's head and just having the same thoughts over and over again. That felt a bit repetitive, but I will say the ending did provide further clarification, and it did develop certain ideas. Honestly, this book was not my favorite. I thought I would love it because I usually love stream of consciousness novels, Jeanette Winterson or like Clarice Lispector, but this was just an entirely different genre of stream of consciousness, and at some points it felt like a slog. So that's just my opinion. So that completes the 6 books that I read in March, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.